And welcome back to Chicago Bulls Insider. Today, we're going to be talking about the Chicago Bulls second round selection in Lachlan Olbrich. Next, we're going to be talking about the Chicago Bulls signing an undrafted point guard in Caleb Grill. We're going to be talking about what both of these additions mean for the Chicago Bulls. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to go ahead and remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Vazelis slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. So make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. And let's start with round number 2 for the Chicago Bulls. And so if you did not get a chance to hear the news earlier, the Chicago Bulls were going to be picking at pick number 45. They ended up trading that pick to the Los Angeles Lakers for cash considerations. They ended up trading down to pick number 55. They did not trade out of the round. And ultimately, they went ahead and they selected Lachlan Olbrich here. And so Lachlan Olbrich is a center out of Australia. That is where he played professional basketball. Before he played professionally over in Australia, he did play for UC Riverside. So he had some success there with UC Riverside, and he definitely had some success here playing for Australia. And so here is some of the numbers here before we jump into the stats and things with him. And so I'm seeing that he actually measured in at 6'8" barefoot. He is 6'10", I believe, with shoes on there. And so he's 8'11", or he has an 8'11" standing reach. He has a 31 even vertical. 230 was his weight, and 6'11" the wingspan. He's 21 years old. He played in the NBL, and he also played in UC Riverside, which we just talked about here. And so let's start with UC Riverside because he definitely had some success here. He averaged 11.8 points per game and 6 rebounds a game, and he was the freshman of the year in the Big West. And so he had definitely it's a solid season and elected to go back over to Australia to play professional basketball. But this just gives you a little bit of an indication of how well he can compete. He's come over and played in college basketball and was successful there in year one. Now, going back to Australia here, we'll bring up his numbers and take a look at that. And so you could see that you will see a player that really, he didn't get a whole bunch of minutes, but the last season that he played in, 8.7 points a game, 0.6 with the blocks, 0.4 with the steals, 3.8 rebounds, 56.4% from the free throw line, 60% from the field, 0.9 from three in 16.7 minutes here. And so I think it's reported that he is going to be a two-way player, and this is not going to be a draft and stash. And so we'll be in the two-way contract, or we'll be on a two-way contract here for the Chicago Bulls. And so we'll get a chance to at least take a look at him and see what he could do. And so, look, I think that, man, he's a solid big as far as bringing physicality to the game. I think that that is a lot of the things that I'm seeing on him with his draft profiles and things like that. You're seeing a player that plays physical. He doesn't mind the contact. I think that he plays with a high motor as well. He has a pretty good feel for the game. And he's not going to dominate you as far as athletically, as far as jumping over you, jumping through you, anything like that. But what he does do is he uses his basketball IQ and the feel for the game to really play off of angles. I think that he does a terrific job as far as getting in the post, and he's pretty crafty that way. I think that one of the things that he would have to get better at is kind of getting a more defined offensive game. But he's a guy that certainly I think could play in transition. He looks like that he's a player that can get the rebound and then start the fast break or whatnot. So he definitely feels, or definitely looks like he feels comfortable as far as taking the basketball off of the defensive board and starting the fast break. And so he'll run in transition as well. And so, look, I think that if you're looking for a player that is going to compete hard and maybe compete his way to try to get into a rotational standpoint, then I think that you definitely hit something here with Lachlan Olbrich. I think that is what you're looking for, a guy that competes pretty hard here. And so, I like that if you're trying to get the identity of the team changed as far as just competing at a high level or whatnot. And so we'll see what happens. We'll see if he actually gets some major minutes. I do expect to hopefully see him at Summer League and see what he can do with, just the rest of the players that the Chicago Bulls elect to bring on. But, I just think that it's interesting here because the Chicago Bulls could have went in a different direction, especially when you look at how things really shaped out. And so we'll talk about that here in a moment, and just reflecting if the Chicago Bulls missed on opportunities. But for right now, the Chicago Bulls do take a center here out of Australia in Lachlan Olbrich. And so next, I wanted to talk about the next addition here for the Chicago Bulls, as I just see that they actually bring in an undrafted free agent here in Caleb Grill. And so Caleb Grill, if you're not familiar with him, look, this guy has played a lot of college basketball, and man, he's played for a couple teams. But I think the real thing with him is this guy can score the basketball, and he can score it from deep. And so this guy can definitely shoot the basketball, and he's a tough on-ball defender, it looks like. And so the thing about him, he's gritty, plays pretty hard. A guy that can knock down the shot, like I said. And so you're seeing his stats here. You see what he did his last season with Missouri. And so 6'3", 205, 13.7 points per game, 0.9 with the turnovers, 1.7 with the steals, 0.1 with the blocks, 1.1 in assists, 3.6 with the rebounds, 86.4% from the free throw line, 39.6 from three, and he shot 47.2 from the field here. And so one of the big achievements for him is he was actually the sixth man of the year in the SEC. And so this is a guy that has definitely achieved here playing some college basketball. And man, he just looks tough. And I like the way that he is as far as off-ball movement. And so I think when you look at his highlights and things like that, you will see a player that has the ability to set defenders up and really get to some open spaces on the floor. He can knock down some deep threes, and so certainly looked like he was shooting well behind the three-point line. And so that was nice to see. And then again, I just like his movement. And so with him, he reminds me a little bit of like what Kevin Huerter gives you as far as the movement off ball and things like that. I think players that are just constantly always thinking about how they can get to open spaces. And so that's what I see with Caleb Grill. Now, make no mistake about this. This is an undrafted free agent signing. And so, look, I think that if he's able to, play his way into, getting onto the G League team or two-way contract and then getting an opportunity, hey, maybe he can take and run with it, but we'll see what happens. What happens. But again, this guy is a guy that really specializes off of hitting threes and screens and things like that. And look, man, I think that, he's a player that he reminds you a little bit of like a Landry Shamet, or also to an AJ Green is what I'm seeing as far as comparisons for him in his NBA.com profile. So I can definitely see that. And so we'll see what happens here. We'll see if the Chicago Bulls end up adding any more free agents here. But so far, these are the two new additions for the Chicago Bulls. And we'll see if they can somehow try to fight and carve a rollout for themselves for this team. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the last portion here and just looking at missed opportunities for the Chicago Bulls. And so, look, I think that coming into the second round, we knew it was the possibility that the Chicago Bulls could either trade up, they could trade down, or trade out of the draft. And that is something that Marc Eversley said here. And so they decided to go ahead and trade down into the draft. And I mean, they still got a player, but when you look at the players that, they certainly gave up on, like the Chicago Bulls, if they would have stayed put or even just maybe gave cash considerations to move up slightly, they could have probably got maybe a solid piece that perhaps could maybe be fighting for a rotation here And certainly I think that they could get somebody that could maybe immediately impact your front court right now. And so I think that that was probably the missed opportunity there. I think that there were some solid players that we had talked about that could possibly come in and maybe impact the Chicago Bulls. And so we talked about Roscoe Zakarski. Believe he actually went at pick number 45, if I'm not mistaken. Then also too, we had Maxim Renaud. He also went shortly after. I think it was like pick number 42. So shortly before the Chicago Bulls would have picked. But like I said before, maybe the Chicago Bulls would have been interested in this getting him if they would have went ahead and maybe did what the Lakers did and given up some cash considerations to maybe move up to get to a player like that. And so, those I think are something that we'll go back and look back on and see what happens as the season goes along and really as the seasons go along and see how this team shapes out. But I do think that, the real possibility to add, some front court presence and then also to maybe a little bit of more of a defensive presence here to go with this team. I think that that was something that was missed. And so you guys let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking. Did the Chicago Bulls miss on some opportunities in the second round? Also, too, what do you think about the new additions here? Because so far at the time of this recording, I have Caleb Grill, who is signed undrafted or an undrafted player that signed with the Chicago Bulls. And so that's the first one that I see here. Haven't seen anything else. And then lastly, what do you think here about pick number 5 here as the Chicago Bulls go with the center here out of Australia, Lachlan Olbrich? And so I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And as we always say, look, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.